What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and with the HTC U11, the supposed successor to the HTC 10 right around the corner, I think it's only fitting that we take a look back at the most underrated flagship of 2016. It's a phone that definitely deserved a lot more attention than it got, and now that it's a year old, let's go ahead and revisit the HTC 10 and see exactly how well it's held up. This is 1 year later with the HTC 10. It really is unfortunate that the HTC 10 didn't get more attention from consumers. It was pretty much universally praised by reviewers, which was really good for HTC considering everything that came between the M7 and the 10 didn't necessarily receive the same treatment. As good as the HTC 10 was and still is, people just weren't buying it, and aside from tech journalists and reviewers, I've yet to see this phone being used in the wild by an average consumer. I think I've seen more LG G5s in the wild than the HTC 10, and I would partly put that blame on HTC's marketing or lack thereof. It literally became the best phone of 2016 that people weren't buying, which is a shame because it went toe-to-toe extremely well with other flagships on the market. Remember when the original HTC One M7 and the Galaxy S, I think it was the Galaxy S4 at the time, were the two hottest Android phones on the market? With LG delivering a flop last year, this could have been HTC's moment to capture that magic again, but there just wasn't enough of a push behind this device for HTC to really capitalize on that opportunity. I still think it's a very attractive looking phone and easily one of my favorite designs from 2016. The metal body feels incredible in the hand, and the huge chamfer along the back is a very unique touch that I wished HTC wasn't so quick to get rid of. The front of the phone was completely clean and free of any logos or branding, which is honestly how it always should be for any smartphone, but something I truly appreciated about the HTC 10 was how easy it was to use in one hand. It has a very small footprint, and despite having an all-metal body, it was easy to hold onto because of the flat sides. In terms of the phone's durability, I didn't exactly baby this phone, and while it does have some minor nicks and scrapes, which by the way is much more noticeable on the matte black version, overall it's still in great shape, especially for never being in a case. I'm also a huge fan of the display. Normally I prefer AMOLED, but HTC has always done an excellent job with LCD. I personally think their phones have the best LCD panels on the market. I love how vibrant, sharp, and contrasty this display is, and if you didn't know any better, you would think that this is an AMOLED screen just because of how bright and colorful it looks. One thing that did change rather significantly on the HTC 10 from previous HTC phones is the audio experience. No, I'm not talking about the headphone jack. That feature did remain intact and actually provided some very high quality audio with the built-in DAC and amp. I'm referring to the speakers. The HTC 10 went for one front-firing speaker and a bottom-facing woofer instead of dual front-facing speakers. It turned out to not be such a bad change, but I do miss having front-facing speakers, a feature that has sort of disappeared entirely from smartphones. Performance even after a year is still quite good in my experience. While the specs aren't the flagship standard anymore, it's still very snappy and responsive, even after several software updates. Speaking of updates, the phone did receive an update to Android Nougat and is also fairly up to date with Android security patches. This update also brought Google Assistant on board, but aside from the features and enhancements that you gain from Nougat, the experience feels pretty much the same as it was when the HTC 10 was on Marshmallow. That's mostly because HTC Sense hasn't changed all that much, and although Sense is still one of the cleanest Android experiences, it does feel like it needs a little bit of a refresh, which hopefully we'll see on the U11. Battery life on the other hand has not really held up that well, but I never really thought that battery life on the HTC 10 was amazing by any stretch of the imagination, and the 3000 mAh battery is pretty average by today's standards, and it never really got me through a full day, especially not with heavy use. It does however have Quick Charge 3.0, which is really nice, so getting this phone back up and running was never really that big of a deal. Where HTC historically has struggled a lot with is the camera department, but that changed pretty drastically with the HTC 10. While I still feel like this camera was a step behind its 2016 flagship counterparts from LG and Samsung, it's leaps and bounds better than what we saw on the M7, M8, and M9. I know that may not sound like it's saying much, but this is a really good camera, and I forgot how good this camera was until I started using it again. Even digging back through a lot of the old photos that I took on this phone when it was brand new, the photos are a lot better than what I initially remembered. It also has manual controls and the ability to shoot in RAW, so you have a lot of flexibility here when it comes to shooting photos. The front-facing camera is also quite good, and it featured optical image stabilization, a feature that I'm not entirely sure why we don't see more of on front-facing cameras. It's perfect if you love taking selfies, and it's an even better better camera if you're into vlogging. And speaking of vlogging, we have someone on the team who did quite a bit of vlogging on the HTC 10 on top of many other things, of course. So let's go ahead and kick it over to him and see exactly what he has to say about the HTC 10. You already know who it is. It's Mr. Joshua Vergara himself.
These are all really great points by Lon, and I wanted to chime in to give my thoughts on the HTC 10 as well, because it might be my favorite phone from last year. Now, there are a couple of really big reasons for that, and one of them is because of the vlogging experience. The OIS-enabled front-facing camera proved to be a pretty good tool for a couple of vlogs that I did on my personal channel called Tech and Tea, and you've been watching a couple of those clips right now. Putting OIS on the front-facing camera was just one of the many things that HTC actually got right with the 10, including the metal build, the Android iteration, which is one of my favorites actually, and then of course there's the headphone jack experience. Now I'm wearing my Audio-Technica M50X's right now, and they were incredibly fun to use on the HTC 10. And it was because of that I made the realization I listen to music and podcasts on smartphones way more often than I use them as main cameras. And it's because of that I gravitated to the HTC 10 and its third-party DAC and built-in amp. And that's the reason why this phone is actually one of the most memorable experiences I had from 2016. So hopefully the follow-up rather, to the HTC 10 is going to continue this legacy. But based upon what HTC is doing right now, well, we could feel a little bit skeptical. But one thing is for certain, the HTC 10 deserves its place as a classic of 2016.
The biggest question here is the HTC 10 still worth buying in 2017? Well, if you get it direct from HTC, it's still pretty expensive, but if you can get it for a good deal on third-party sites like Amazon, I would say go for it. It's a fantastic phone that has aged very well, and it isn't missing a whole lot even when you compare it to the most current of flagships. It certainly deserves to be in more people's pockets, especially if you cherish that classic HTC metal build and design. Considering what we've seen so far from HTC this year, the HTC 10 looks to be the end of that era, so I would get your hands on one while you still can. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this quick revisited look of the HTC 10. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell while you're at it so you don't miss out on future videos. And check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+, all that good stuff will be linked down below. And check out the website as well, androidauthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.